Not another one. Welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. My name is John Potter. I am a councillor up in Lancashire and I host this wonderful deep dive into liberalism and everything that's going on in the UK. And joining me today, freshly back from Somerton and Frome, is Hannah Kitching, leader of the Barnsley Lib Dems. Hello, Hannah.
Morning, John. Morning, everyone.
Well, it keeps on coming, doesn't it, the news, Hannah? But we will go on and talk about Tamworth a little bit later on. But I think most of our listeners, because we are now in the end stages of the first set of by-elections, and obviously the big one from the Lib Dems is Somerton and Frome. You've just spent 10 days there, Hannah. So what were your impressions?
Yeah, that's right. So less than 2 weeks till polling day in Somerton and Frome, somewhat unbelievably. It feels and it felt when I was down there like sort of the fastest by-election in history, really. Obviously not an accident that the Conservatives called it in a terrible rush to make life as difficult as possible for everyone involved. But yeah, so when I got down there week last Tuesday, there was already less than 4 weeks to go, and the team has only been there for a week. So it really is like a full by-election campaign on speed, and they're really kind of pulling out of all of the stops to try and deliver the volume and size of campaign that we normally do. And this is, I think, I'm sure someone that knows more than me can correct me if I'm incorrect, this is, I believe, the largest parliamentary constituency in England. It is absolutely massive.
We keep on picking them, don't we? Breckenham, Radnorshire. Let's just hope Jamie Stone never, ever retires. And so we have to do the Highlands because we keep on doing these huge geographical areas.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we sort of excel at that in Scotland, don't we? But it's, particularly for sort of some of our London-based, activists who are used to a rather more compact style of campaigning, and there don't seem to be any roads either across the constituency that actually go between the places that you want to go. So it's a huge constituency. Obviously, John, we always say we are first and foremost a campaigning podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm just going to absolutely get this out there. They need more people. Yeah. And I know we always say that. But the issue here, as I say, is the speed at which this is all having to happen.
Yeah.
And while it is an easier task in some ways than North Shropshire or Tipton and Honiton, because we have actually had an MP there in the past, David Heath, held the seat up until 2015. It very much isn't a shoe-in. Heath apparently never had more than sort of 1,000-ish vote majority. He never had a safe seat. He was never comfortable.
Yeah. His final majority in 2010 was 1,800.
Yeah, which is not huge.
Yeah, just to reiterate your point, Hannah always knows he had 800 votes before that, 600 before that, 130 before that. So yeah,
So when we held it, it was tight, but there's been a mix. So it's a really mixed, it's a really mixed constituency. Again, you've got those huge swathes of really, really Tory areas, and then you've got Frome, which has changed a lot demographically over recent years, with a lot of people moving in from Bristol and Bath and London, which has really sort of changed the demographic. And there's a huge Green vote there because the Greens did very well a couple of rounds of local elections ago when the Liberal Democrats decided not to stand against them, John.
Yeah, which is
get rid of some Tory councillors. Lessons need to be learnt on that, don't they? Yeah. And that Green vote is proving extremely sticky and really, really difficult to squeeze, because those Greens in Frome, like, they live in a bubble, and and they don't really sort of appreciate the vast Toriness of the constituency. And, you know, if every Green-leaning voter in Frome voted Green, the Greens would not win the parliamentary by-elections, John. But they would let the Conservatives win. So yeah, it's very much not done and dusted. And they've got a huge amount of stuff to get out, including the fact that the postal votes are likely to be sent out 2 days early today rather than Monday. So, you know, let's just get it out of the way. If anyone is listening and has been wondering about whether to go, you need to go. Like, you need to go this weekend, next week. Next weekend is the final weekend, and then they'll need help polling week and polling day as well. It's very easy to get to on the train.
I was and because obviously I've had a really busy couple of weeks, but really because of a couple of months since May, and actually I've just decided, right, I've got to go down next weekend. So it's just to lend down. Plus, I get horrendous FOMO, and I always feel like I don't want to miss out.
You want to be part of this one. You know, you will have really bad FOMO, and it's kind of, you know, the stakes are really high with this one because, you know, sort of previously the ones we've gone after in the past. I mean, I know we've been the bookies' favourites in the last one because they got sick of losing money on us. Yeah. But really, you know, they have been absolute mountains to climb. Whereas this one, if we don't get this one over the line, it's going to be serious, like egg on the face for us time.
It's not a small majority though. I mean, we talk about it's 19,000. It's over 19,000 majority, and so actually, but I think the issue about this is that we're going to talk about the other by-elections in a second, but what Lib Dems need to do nationally is actually making sure we're keeping pace. I mean, me and you have long-standing and fights with our local Labour Party, and I'm very much, when, you know, Southern Lib Dems say, oh, you know, we can work with the Labour Party, we say, well, try living up here and say the same thing. But what we do need to do is put a little check into Labour as well, because the reason why we, you know, North Shropshire, Tiverton, Honham was so important because it proved in those areas where Labour's their vote ceiling is never going to be enough to win these seats, and the Greens likewise. But the Lib Dems are pretty much the only party that can beat them. But we have to convince people of that. And I was speaking to a gentleman about a parliamentary constituency up here, and he said, "Oh, it must be really easy for you to get the vote now because Tories are in disarray." And I said, "It's easier, and they've given us plenty of ammunition, but you've still got to have the firepower to actually use that ammunition. And if you haven't, then they won't vote for you." Because a lot of people just assume especially they assume people are just going to move with the wind in terms of their vote. Lots of people have a natural default to their vote and need to be convinced to move from that default. And I think that's why, you know, the knocking on doors, the leaflets, all that matters to shift them, to give them a reason not to vote how they normally do. And I think, it works so well in those parliamentary by-elections. And we have to win this one basically. And Hannah's right. We always say, look, get down there. But there's a reason why we have such great parliamentary successes in North Shropshire. And Helen Morgan's done an absolutely incredible job since she got elected. And those areas now have better representation. But the reason why they win so big is because people pull the finger out and go do it. And if we get complacent by an inch, we lose.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, this, you can, people are maybe looking at this and thinking, well, you know, it's not like Tiverton and Honiton, you know, we won the council in Shropshire, you know, we've got a local team, but it's the pace and it's the volume. You know, yes, you've got a local team who are delivering their monthly focuses and doing the street letters and doing their casework, but, you know, the volume that we're asking people to now deliver is, you know, it's so much beyond what that local team can possibly handle. And that's, you know, and obviously, you know, it's a big constituency. We're stronger in some parts of the constituency than others, you know, and that's why we're reliant on, you know, on volunteers and activists and people who, you know, love jumping on that by-election bandwagon to get down there. It is very easy to get to. It's very easy to get to Frome on the train from London, Bristol, Bath, all those places in the south, John, you know, and the HQ is literally next to the train station. So if anyone's thinking, oh, well, you know, I don't really have transport, you can get them on the train, absolutely no bother. And there is loads and loads and loads to do within walking distance of Frome. It's not quite so easy to get to by car, whereas Tiverton was literally just off the M5. it is more of a hack. You have to sort of go around Bath and stuff. But once you're there, it's so useful to have a car. And anyone sort of coming from further in the southwest, Devon, Cornwall, can drop up to the Langport hub, which is down sort of like the southwest of the constituency. So yeah, please don't assume it's in the bag. That would be an absolute disaster for us. Get there, please.
And I suppose from another point of view, we've just had a fantastic set of local elections. I mean, I was just at the ALD Kickstart weekend with a whole load of people just elected, people who have just become council leaders. You want to keep that momentum going. That's the point of it, isn't it? You can be quite tired after a local election campaign, and you can think, oh, I could just use with a couple of months off. Actually, using a by-election to re-energise your volunteers. And, I've always enjoyed myself at a by-election. It is always good fun meeting up with people. So, and if you're wondering more information about where you can go, where you can stay, all that sort of thing, there is a virtual HQ on Facebook. If you're not part of Facebook, let us know, and I'm sure we'll find a contact for someone you can get in contact with and get information.
We could drop some links in the podcast description, I think, John, couldn't we?
We can. But because they'll also tell you, look, we need help at such and such place. Because I'll be driving, I can go wherever they want me to go. So I assume I'll be in Frome, but we'll see. So that's interesting. I mean, what have you seen from the other parties in the by-election, Hannah?
So they're all campaigning, basically. So we've seen Conservative literature, we've seen Conservative canvassers. They might not be feeling on top of the world at the moment, but they're not going to take this one. They're not going to take this one lying down. But as I said, remember when we held that parliamentary constituency, it was only by those very small majorities. There are still many voters in that constituency who will vote Conservative, and the Tories have got a job to in terms of getting that vote out, to be honest, because we've met Conservatives who are voting Tory, we've met Conservatives who are switching to the Lib Dems, and we've also met a lot of Conservatives who are just saying, I'm going to sit this one out, I'm not planning on voting. And so, there's a job for both of us in terms of trying to persuade them to come to us, and for the Conservatives to try and get their vote out. The Labour Party are doing a little, I would say, not a huge amount. I think Labour, in areas like the West Country, if you're a Labour voter there, you kind of, you get the deal, you understand it. And the Labour vote is reasonably well squeezed already.
Of all the by-elections we've had, other than maybe Cheshire and Amersham, this is probably where we have a naturally default kind of squeeze. Don't forget, we came from third in North Shropshire, third in Tiverton and Honiton.
Yeah, we are actually in second here. Yeah, we are in second here. Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
The issue really, like I say, is that Green vote in Frome. And you've got a bit of a mixture there of sort of people who voted Green as like an anti-Tory vote, who are willing to vote for any anti-Tory party. But I think don't necessarily, are maybe a little bit confused about what is genuinely the best way to do that. But then you've got your sort of more ideological Greens, and we are hearing some messages on the doorstep around, no, I need to vote with my heart. If everyone voted with the heart, maybe the little guys could win. We are the little guys. And some of them are going to stick.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the case.
Round, yeah, but the Greens are. So whereas in Tiverton and Honiton, I don't know if anyone remembers, the Green candidate there, basically every time anyone put a mic in her hand, she said her line was basically, it's a real honour to stand in this by-election. What I really wish was that everyone could vote with their heart in this by-election, but until we get electoral reform, until we get proportional representation, we can't do that. She didn't explicitly say vote tactically to beat the Tories, but she very much alluded to it. The Green candidate in this election is not saying that.
But that's why. I mean, we can't expect the Greens to do our job for us. I'm quite firm with Lib Dems who say we need that's the Progressive Alliance argument, isn't it? That's the kind of saying, we're not going to do it on our own. Can we get help from others? And it's always been my view that firstly, what you mentioned before, it usually stings you in the long run. In terms of it, you don't know what's going to happen in your patch, and if you give the Greens an in, you might not be able to get them out. But also, you can't blame the other parties for you not winning. And the way to convince those voters who are wobbly Greens or wobbly Labour or need to get the squeeze is to hit them, as in not physically, as in hit them with leaflets, hit them with canvassing, because most people aren't massively ideologically driven one way or another. There is a core in all parties that is, but actually, and we've seen it in all the others. The public is generally fairly sensible in terms and understands where the power lies and where the fight is at. And this one is one where we can do it. But in order for us to do that, we need to get canvassing data to be able to target those people effectively. So I know Tiverton and Honiton, I was speaking to some of the data guys coming into it, and we weren't sure we had enough voter ID data to have a decent enough knock-up on the day. So for all those people who are not knowing what I'm referring to, so if you need in your ward 1,000 votes to win, ideally you need 1,500 votes of voters in your patch that you know of who are Lib Dem leading, and also you've got to times that by many folds for a parliamentary seat. So that is really key. So I mean, I love canvassing, but obviously they'll need not just deliveries. You're not just going to be going around, even though I'm sure it's beautiful to deliver, but knocking on doors in Somerton and Frome is going to be really important.
Yeah, those doorstep conversations are really making a difference. And what's been interesting is when I arrived a week last Tuesday, I was door knocking in Frome, and on some of those doorsteps, the first leaflet, so the tabloid, which did go out with a green squeeze in Frome, was literally on the doormat or hanging through the letterbox. So they hadn't had anything. They'd had like one leaflet or something. That they hadn't started to get the message, and that green vote felt very, very, very sticky. And literally within 5-6 days, when they'd had a couple more deliveries, they were starting to say, I do really want to vote green, but it's not going to help here, is it? It's that we need to beat the Tories.
Because
the message is getting through, but there's less, postal votes are going to arrive within the next 2 or 3 days. People are going to start voting within the next 2 or 3 days. And, at some point, in some by-elections where we've had a decent run-in, by the time people start voting, they've had 27 bits of literature. These people have had 3. I mean, bless their sweethearts, they're still handing me the canvas card back and going, no, thank you, I've had the leaflet.
But it's to get rid of, because cynicism in politics is fairly high. I mean, it's always fairly high, but it is particularly high now, where people, every party will claim, oh, we're the best place to do that, whether it's dodgy bar charts or not, because you want to try and drive up your vote as much as possible. And so the way you kind of get over that is, again, by volume. If they've had 3 knocks on your door from a Lib Dem and 5 bits of literature, no door knock from Labour and 1 bit of literature, who are they going to believe is best placed? Just on an instinctively gut level, they will think, oh, hang on, the Lib Dems are clearly going to have a better run at this than anybody else. So, but do get there and do try and make a difference, because, like I say, we need to keep the momentum up. Because let's go on to some of the other by-elections. So, firstly, we'll talk about. There's another one. Obviously, Tamworth has now happened. I think some people have taken to calling Westminster Pestminster because of the absolute horrendous. Basically, the horrendous atmosphere for people that work there, men, women, but particularly young women seem to be getting targeted. Although Chris Pincher, it was obviously young men, and just the influence of power and a divine right to do what the hell you think you can do is just made Westminster toxic. But it does mean there'll be a recall petition in Tamworth. Now, I think, can the recall petition start straight away, or does he have some right of appeal? I don't think he does, actually, Chris Pincher.
I would love to claim expertise on this topic, John, but I'm not going to blag this one. I genuinely don't know. I genuinely don't know.
No, sorry. But Tamworth is another one. I think probably very similar to Selby in terms. I mean, it's quite strange. In fact, all the by-elections we're going to talk about, Somerton and Frome, Selby, and Tamworth, all have about 19,000 to 20,000 Tory majorities, and it is a real test, because I think can we just take Uxbridge to one side, because I think that was always going to be a fairly comfortable-ish by-election for Labour. We'll see how it goes. We never know what's going to happen. But I think
apparently they're not enjoying Sadiq Khan's recent efforts on ULEZ.
We should just say also thank you very much to all the Lib Dems that have stood in the council by-elections since May's election. Some of them have been postponed elections, and in particular, one thing you do need to work. We've talked a little bit about the Greens already. So in Kent last night, the Lib Dems held a county seat by 11 votes. Now, this was not traditionally a Lib Dem versus Green battle, but it became one. And so again, the Greens only lost out that seat from taking it off the Lib Dems by 11 votes. They are not your friends, people. They are not. If you want to be green and cuddly, go, sign up to Greenpeace. Don't help the Green Party where you've got good Lib Dems who could be doing it. But let's go on to the other by-elections, because the one that I think is really interesting is Selby. I think Labour will take Uxbridge. I think Lib Dems will take Somerton and Frome. If I was in Tory high command, and weirdly enough, I heard this on the Spectator podcast yesterday, the Tories are going to throw everything at Selby. And that's what I would do, actually, if I was a Tory. What you just need to do is blunt Labour somehow.
That's the one they can hold, isn't it? And a hold would
good as win.
Yeah, I mean, being the first prime minister to lose 3 by-elections on one day versus just scraping a hold in one of them. I mean, that's absolutely completely agree. That's where I would be throwing the resource as the Tories. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Selby and Ainsley. Similar to Somerton and Frome, in that you've got a town, in this case Selby, with a good chunk of the population, and then vast swathes of rural Toriness.
Yeah.
So the difference between Selby and Frome is that Selby is Labour. They used to have the MP. It was on slightly different boundaries. So when Selby was on different boundaries, they had the MP in Selby. They have all of the councillors on the new North Yorkshire Council in Selby. We didn't stand any candidates in Selby in the North Yorkshire elections last year.
And this goes back to what we...
Isn't ideal, is it, really?
No, always stand a candidate. But this goes back to what me, David, who was on with me and David last time? I think it was Richard, where we were talking... Yeah, it was Richard, because we were talking about Selby, because my mum lives in Selby, so does my sister. Well, in the Selby constituency, so in those vast Tory kind of countryside sticks is where they live. And I obviously knew nothing about the Lib Dem local party. It's not my patch. I thought, it feels like a kind of area that Lib Dems could do well, but... and we did say on that podcast, it all depends on the strength of our local party. And if the local, and that's it. And that's the problem. So we are not in a position to challenge to win that seat. We are in Somerton. We were in North Shropshire, because I remember the Shropshire Lib Dems, as soon as that election was announced, roll up the sleeves, let's get out 19,000 leaflets. There isn't that capacity. So even though if all things being equal and all sides had the same amount of power, you think, that could be demographically somewhere that'd be quite interesting. But
so this is me with my, because people that don't know, I am the Yorkshire and Humber campaign committee chair. So I've been having conversations about Selby and Ainsley for many months, John. And as much as I have had a wonderful time in Somerton and Frome, and I had a wonderful time in Kitching last year, I would really like an all-in parliamentary by-election that I do not have to drive 4.5 hours to get to. That would be really tremendous. However, just because I think, some people will probably be wondering, why we're not throwing everything at Selby and Ainsley, just to give you a few kind of pointers, really. I think, number one, if it was the only by-election that was happening, there might be a slightly different conversation to be had, but, we obviously have to be smart with our resources. But there's a number of factors. There isn't a local party. The local party got absorbed into York local party some time ago because of lack of membership. The new North Yorkshire Unitary Authority had all of elections last May, and obviously we did really, really well in those, winning seats in the Harrogate and Knaresborough constituency and in other places as well. but we did not stand any candidates, even paper candidates, within the vast majority of the Selby and Ainsty constituency, and particularly in Selby, which means, there's no kind of track record there. There are no further local elections in North Yorkshire for 4 more years, because those all-ups stand for 5 years. So if there were locals next year, we could say, well, let's pick a ward, find an enthusiastic candidate, and work it up for a local election success. And the other factor is Labour. So, as I said, they used to hold the constituency when Selby was on different boundaries. They've got all the councillors. But what's really important for them is that under the parliamentary boundary changes, Selby is coming out of that vast swathe of Tory ruralness and is going into a constituency with Kippax and Methley. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that particular part of East Leeds. But yeah, that seat is an absolute slam dunk, really, to be honest, for Labour. And so I think that is why they are throwing so much. They're not. Do they think they can win it this time around? I don't know, to be perfectly honest.
I think it's on a knife edge. Yeah,
they're properly looking at it for last time. There's a couple of caveats, which is that there are some seats in one of the wards, which again under the boundary review are coming into Harrogate and Knaresborough constituency. So obviously there's some resource being put into that, and we have got a really lovely local candidate, Matt Walker, who is just kind of using the opportunity to switch a few of those Tory voters, give them somewhere else to go, because that is a message that is useful for us across rural North Yorkshire.
And it's exactly what you said. So when we think about where we put resources, and it doesn't have to be a parliamentary by-election, it can be in your local party. So I had a chap who was really keen in doing an urban seat in Preston where he lives. He says, look, I really want to go at this. I mean, he's of an age where he knew he may only have like 4 years or something like that. Not to live, but have like kind of active campaigning.
And he wants to spend it being a councillor.
He's gone full throat into it, which is brilliant, which is wonderful to see. We love these kind of new kind of people who get the bug and really want to give things a fight. But I said to him, look, we'll be starting from absolute scratch, and it's what will happen to your efforts once you're not doing it. And I think it's a continuation of that work, because if we threw loads of stuff at Selby and then no one's there to pick it up and use that effort and make it worthwhile, then it eventually flitters out. It just goes. So someone who's going to vote for us now, if we convince someone to vote for us now, and they don't hear from us for 5-10 years, that data is pretty much worthless. Which is why Hannah was saying those areas at the north of the Selby parliamentary constituency, which will go into an area that we are going to keep on that work with, is really important. So it's being efficient, basically. Yeah. Make sure your efforts have some long-term gain. And we can talk a whole lot about targeting. We have done on other episodes about how you can use limited resources. And I no doubt it's going to come as we come to the general election. There's things that, we're excited about doing, but we had the exact same thing about Selby and West Lancs. So we had the West Lancs parliamentary. There was Lib Dem, again, the West Lancs Lib Dems were virtually non-existent, and so were we going to put, and, sometimes you have to get brutal honesty with a candidate. And I thought the West Lancs Lib Dem candidate, who I've known previously, was kind of like, why aren't we getting more stuff here? Well, you haven't proven that we can do anything with it. They'll give you some money to cover your deposit, maybe put out a few bits and pieces, maybe work a ward that you want to work for the county elections in a couple of years. But that, other than that, you've got to earn it. And again, I'll go back to North Shropshire. Straight away, they just had a half-decent set of local elections. They had a decent bit of infrastructure, not enough to win a parliamentary seat, let's be honest with you. But then as soon as the by-election was launched, they said, right, we're going to have a go at this. And they proved it. So when HQ comes in, and that's where the added extra is. So they won that by-election for Helen Morgan because all of us came in and made it winnable. And now, because once you get it, because they'll have loads of data, they'll have loads of poster sites, they'll have loads of all the stuff you want. They'll have got more volunteers. And I remember on Cheshire and Amersham, that was like the first of the kind of the by-elections when the Tories started to topple. we didn't know what we was going to do. We didn't know if we were going to take that in the end. But what we did know is we'd picked up tens of thousands of new data points. We knew we had picked up, I think, 200 new potential volunteers in the constituency and various poster sites all over the constituency as well. So there are wins without winning. But like I said, if we were to do that for Selby, we wouldn't be able to use those little wins either.
No. And I think the thing to remember as well is, we are, we all love a parliamentary by-election, but we are in the run-up to a general election. And we don't know when that is going to be. And, by-elections take a huge amount of our campaigning resource. And those that generate good news for us, obviously strengthen our chances in the upcoming general election. Yep. But, I think, particularly for people in the north of England who are saying, there's just no way, it's too far. I cannot get down to Somerton and Frome. I can't even get to Mid Beds, which we haven't talked about yet, John, and we must. I can't get to Mid Beds. Why aren't we doing anything with this by-election in Selby? What I would say is, if you're itching to campaign this summer, to kick the Tories out of government, go and campaign in one of our target parliamentary seats. Yeah. That's what's going to to really make a difference at the general election. We need to keep all those target parliamentary seats going. We should be ramping up those campaigns at the moment, not putting them on ice, while we all go and do other fun things.
And we had a really nice conversation. So I was doing a bit of mentoring at Kickstart, where I had a couple of the new councils. So I had, not new as in newly controlled Lib Dem councils in Horsham and Mid Sussex. Hello to Martin and Alison, by the way, who are obviously enjoying kind of life as a leader of a council or a deputy leader of a council, but we're saying, look, they have a parliamentary seat they're thinking about. Alison, obviously, in Mid Sussex as well, but they've also got by-elections, and it's about using your time effectively, thinking, okay, what can I use this for? If I'm doing my summertime, so I'm going to spend loads of time trying to get Lisa elected in Stockport. I'm going to spend loads of time trying to get Tom elected in Stockport. Sorry, that's Hazelgrove and Cheadle parts of Stockport for the.
It's all still Stockport though.
It's all counted as Stockport borough. So because that's what I've got to do, and we just do not have the manpower for us to be selfish, and we do not have the manpower for us to be egotistical. By all means, I'm going to use the general election where I am to strengthen our areas so we can build going forward for our local campaigns, because we have a plan. We have a 2-year plan, and we have a longer term kind of 9-year plan. And basing that is using our general election, the general election candidates, because there will be people that come out of the woodwork in general elections. That's something you do want to grab onto. There'll be people that will only get interested in the general election. And if you can grab them and get them to become interested in what you're doing locally, then, if you complain about, I don't have any volunteers or I don't have any such and such.
Delivery network.
Yeah, that's right. All the main things, because we all would all love more manpower, and we'd all love more money that comes from membership. But to do that, we've got to have success. And Somerton and Frome is our success story. We've seen people sign up since Cheshire and Amersham, North Shropshire, Tiverton and Honiton, because we get coverage we couldn't dream of any other time. And it's amazing how often Lib Dems don't quite compute the fact is these parliamentary by-elections are our best way of getting a strong message across that, those 91 seats where the Lib Dems are in second place, there might be 90 now, we are they need that good buzz to win, because we get basically bugger all airtime generally, but we do get it when we beat the Tories in a by-election. And so Somerton and Frome is really important. But let's talk about getting attention. Let's talk about Nadine Dorries. And
the imaginary by-election.
The imaginary I mean, it is difficult. I can't. What was the chap who stood against Sarah Green in Cheshire and Amersham? Now I thought he might be the worst loser of all.
I can't say.
He was such a bitter little man after he lost. I think he might have been usurped by Nadine Dorries in terms of bitter little stupid people, because it is ridiculous, Hannah.
Do you know, I do have, I think Alison said in our podcast chat that she had a grudging respect for her. And I have to say, I'm sort of on that. It's sort of hilarious, really. She's clearly, yes, she's attention seeking, but she's also trying to, she's not just like rolled over and binned it off, has she? She is trying to create as much disruption and chaos for the Conservatives, like, as is humanly possible. Will she ever resign? I have absolutely no idea. We have so mid beds. So back to the old, rallying cry.
Yeah.
First and foremost, if you can get to Somerton and Frome in the next 2 weeks, please do. If you really, really, really can't, if it's completely impossible for you, but you can get to mid beds, please go to mid beds. Because now, while in an ideal world, we would have been able to put that particular by-election project on ice while we go beat Tories in Somerset, unfortunately, the Labour Party are... I'm trying to think of a family-friendly way to put this.
I'll bleep it out. Don't worry.
I'm gonna go for dick waving then, Sean. If that's right. If we're gonna get
that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. We'll pass the censors. Don't worry.
Yeah, I've not been particularly close to it. But basically, we have the same challenge in mid beds that we had in Cheshire and Amersham, Tipton and Honiton, North Shropshire, which is that we are not in second, the Labour Party in second, and we need to establish ourselves as the challengers. Now, we know, and I think in their heart of hearts, the Labour Party know that they have a ceiling. And so, while, we have a ceiling in many places as well, but in these kinds of places, Labour have a ceiling. And while they have a reasonable amount of support in, I think it's Flitwick, isn't it? One of the towns, they have a decent amount of support there. They, let's see what they manage in Selby and Ainsty, I guess, John, is a question there, isn't it? Because do they have the ability to switch Tory votes in the way that we do? Now, let's be absolutely fair to Labour. If they're going to win a general election, they need to switch Tory votes.
Yeah, and I'm generally interested from the nerd point of it, rather than the partisan Lib Dem part. I'm generally interested to see how Labour do in mid beds and also in Selby, because it will give an indication of exactly how. Because we both have been fairly cautious. I can't remember. I didn't think Labour were on course to a majority. Well, certainly it was more like kind of 60-40. But since then, the SNP have imploded, and any kind of resuscitation that Sunak was having has been squished completely. So it is. There's still no love for Starmer, and I just don't know, as someone who deals in comms and political campaigning so much, whether that not being Tory will last them right the way up to the next general election. Is that enough? Just not being Tory? Because that's what basically Labour are going for here. Win mid-beds because we're not Tory.
They are quite Tory, aren't they? To be perfectly honest. So I think, I'm not sure that Starmer is going for not being Tory so much as for going more Tory than the Tories.
Yeah. I know it's interesting. Again, the amount our base seems to be firming up, because we have several people who are Labour leaning at one point, who are Labour members, Labour supporters at one point, and the amount of them that now come up to me and say, I cannot believe how bad Keir Starmer is being. And it isn't, he might still get over the line anyway.
Yeah, I think regular listeners to the podcast know exactly how I feel about the prospect of a Labour majority. I think it would be an absolute disaster, to be perfectly honest, because it will leave us stuck with first past the post. There is absolutely not a chance that Starmer will give us electoral reform if he wins a majority, which means we'll get 4, possibly 8 years of an authoritarian, deeply illiberal Labour government, and then we'll probably get another 20 years of the Tories again.
Well, that's
they'll miss their chance to change the voting system. So I personally, I think it would be a disaster. However, I am coming round to the depressing realisation that the collapse of the SNP in Scotland has created that clear path for Labour to win a majority. And you're absolutely right, John. There is no love at all on the doorsteps for Starmer. I've literally not heard Keir Starmer's name on the doorsteps in 10 straight days door knocking in Frome. in any context. So I've not heard it in a positive way from Labour voters. I've not heard it in a negative way from Conservative voters. He's literally like just not been mentioned at all. And, might that actually be an asset for the Labour Party, after the polarising Jeremy Corbyn? Yes, probably. Might it be an asset for us? Maybe, hopefully.
I can't work out who I think is more Gordon Brown, Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer, in terms of, a technocrat who's not gonna quite get over the line, because it feels like everyone talks about, is it 92 or 97? It feels more like 2010 for me. And my concern is if Labour do get a very narrow majority, they're at hog to the nutto lefts that are the left wingers that are still in there, but also remember in 97 the economy was left in a pretty healthy state going upwards. Big issues like Northern Ireland were already on the track to be getting, the Good Friday peace agreements were already well in the works by that point. So John Major, and I'm really too young to kind of remember 97, but John Major generally left the Labour Party an excellent legacy to go on to govern. Nobody's thinking Labour's going to have that sort of economic legacy next year. So they could have a small majority and lose it within 5 years, and we're back in the Tories. And that,
because they're too stubborn to bin off first past the post, and that's on Starmer, to be perfectly honest. We know that there is significant appetite within the Labour membership for a majority now in the Labour membership want PR. We know that. How many terrible Conservative governments do we have to have before that will get through to them? So I don't know. My concern always, John, about the Labour polling extremely well. So if Labour win Selby and Ainsty, that will make establishing us as the challengers in mid-beds harder.
Yeah.
And my worry always when Labour are polling well is that they get silly and they get beyond themselves and they start thinking they can win everywhere, and therefore our squeeze
becomes more difficult.
And our squeeze starts to unravel, and that doesn't result in them winning those seats. It results in the Conservatives winning those seats, which might be enough to deny Labour a majority, but frankly I'd rather it was us that did that, not the Tories.
And just to go back, so there was actually a by-election in South Lanarkshire last night, as we're recording this on Friday morning, in East Kilbride. So well done to Jake Stevenson for flying the flag for the Lib Dems. He knew he wasn't going to win, but always stand a candidate, as Hannah said earlier, really important. But the SNP lost that to Labour. But here's the interesting one. So Labour was up nearly 14%, getting 40% of the vote. The Tories were up over 6% in this seat, and the SNP down 8%. But just over
it's a different question, though, isn't it? In Scotland, it's again, we don't have any of our Scottish experts on, but I remember Christine Jardine saying to me last year that in Scotland it's SNP or the other. Who is in second, who is the challenger, and it's basically nationalism versus unionism. And that is basically the dividing line. And fundamentally, the Scottish Conservatives are a unionist party. And so if people are moving away from nationalism, they're gonna pick some of those up.
Right, I've got some latest polling for you, Hannah. You can do this is as it's happening. Let's see how. So Selby and Anstey has just been announced. This is a constituency poll.
Is this being conducted by the Labour Party by any chance, John?
No, this is JL Partners poll. So this is James Johnson, who was Theresa May's head of comms at some point or something like that. But he does a lot of polls with the Times. So Labour up 16% at 41 in the lead. The Conservatives down 31, down to 29. So that would be a monster win. Lib Dems getting squeezed, Greens up a little bit. So the Lib Dems and Greens generally hovering around. YSP.
Go on, give me a percent. Yeah, Yorkshire. Is it not the Yorkshire Party?
Yorkshire Party getting 4%.
Greens. Give me a percentage. How are we even going to scrape 2%, John? How bad is that?
It's 6% here. for the Lib Dems, 6% Lib Dems, 6% Green. We'll see. We need 5 to keep our deposit, and I think that will be a half decent result for us if we get the 5. But what interests is Reform coming into it at 8%. So
they're taking that Tory vote, aren't they?
Yeah,
I suspect what you'll find as well, in the absence of us, really doing a full-on campaign across the Tory bits, is I suspect that I can't do maths on the hoof, but I suspect that drop in the Conservative vote of 31% is Tories staying at home.
Yeah, it will be, and that's why all by-elections, and I have nerves about the fantastic by-elections we've won. Making sure we win them on a general election when the turnout will probably be double what it normally is. And again, that's why we need to help out in these by-elections, so we get enough data to be able to fight them in the general election when our resources are more spread. The Uxbridge one, new polling's just come out. So again, Lib Dems at 6. We think that's probably just where we are when we're getting squeezed. He says we'll have a 6% kind of hold, but we'll see.
I thought we got 1.2% when we got squeezed, John. But
yeah, sometimes we do. Labour up at 41 again, but only up 3, whereas the Conservatives are down 20% still, but at 33. Now that would be interesting. So we've said about if I was a Tory, I would throw everything at Selby, but that's really interesting that the Tories are pretty close, and actually once you get rid of Reform, they're not a million miles away. But obviously these are samples of usually around 1,000 votes, but because it's a constituency poll, it's more accurate than
for example the one that the Labour Party published in the Telegraph last Saturday, and literally just polled Flitwick.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And and like all things to do with polls, we don't always get the methodology right. And I'm sure Mark Pack's got his latest book on what the polls tell us and what they don't. So you can read that, because neither me or Hannah are polling experts by any sort of mean. But it will be interesting. Like I say, from the nerd point of view of things, it's interesting. And there isn't one for mid-beds, so because it hasn't been called yet, I assume. And they haven't done one for Somerton. So we
don't need polling for Somerton. The answer is always the same, John. Go help. So what about Tamworth? What do we know about Tamworth? All I know about Tamworth is that I used to go clubbing there when I was 16.
In Tamworth? So I have some very, very good friends who are actually members of the Labour Party in Tamworth. We went to uni together, so I'm in Tamworth once a year or something like that. So it is very. I wish I remember the name of the pub in the centre of Tamworth, but it's got a brilliant alehouse in the centre of Tamworth. But it is very, very Tory at the moment. So let me just say, Labour last won it in 2005. So with a 2,000 majority in 2005, the most Labour have ever had was in 97. So at proper peak, they got 7,000 majority. So it's not somewhere that they've ever been rock solid, because again, slightly affluent suburbs of northern Birmingham, basically.
They're certainly on the pitch, though, aren't they? I think it's probably fair to say. Right. Have the boundaries changed at all, or is it still just pretty much as it was?
I think this is some of the problems we're going to. I don't know if the boundaries of Tamworth are massively changing at the next election, but again, Chris Pincher, he's got a 19,500 majority, but he's got a 66% of the vote. So it's 19,000 of a smaller electorate, if you know what I mean, because he's.
I know we don't really talk about this anymore, but is it quite Brexity?
67.5% leave. So it's fairly strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but we'll see what happens in Tamworth, because obviously there'll be a little bit of a time delay while they do the recall petition, because they're going to get 10% of people to vote against to want the recall petition. But that will take, because I remember Brecon and Radnorshire, it did take a little bit of time to get that sorted and then the by-election to be called. But it'll be interesting how much manpower Labour have got to do all these as well, because it is. And because we talked about it from our point of view of Lib Dem activists being spread out, there's only so much HQ staff can do as well. And in the run-up to a general election, when HQ will be thinking, right, we need our staff ready and to go in our target seats that we're going to be targeting, this is because you think they might be away from their homes for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. All that time needs to be given back to them so they don't burn out in a general election campaign. So So I suppose my final message to Lib Dems is like, be nice to HQ. They do a lot of the time. People grumble about HQ, but they are really committed, doing highly stressful things. And just give them a hug if you see them at conference.
They literally give up their lives for 5 weeks to go and work on these by-elections. I went down there in a volunteer capacity out of choice, but if you're HQ staff, that's your job, and and they go where they're told at very short notice. And it's tough. And like I say, this one in Somerton and Frome, it's absolutely full on at the minute. They're having to work at a pace that none of them have ever seen before. So get down there, help them out, be nice to the staff, and let's get Sarah Dyke elected on July 20th.
And I'm not going to say anything more than that, but thank you very much for watching the podcast. Thanks so much to Hannah. We will have another episode soon. We have got one lined up for Scotland, but we're blaming David McKenzie because he definitely said he was going to sort out a Scottish episode, and he's been busy with his new business. So we will chase up that. We'll get a Scottish episode, because we've had really good polling upticks in Scotland and in Wales, actually. So let's see what all the Lib Dems are doing. Let's get some people in on the podcast to talk about, and we'll do further ones. We'll eventually do all our kind of new MP kind of things, including we'll get Shafak to come on as well, our potential new MPs for our target seats, because we want to hear these places, and it's been really good to hear from those candidates on what they're doing. And we did an interview with Monica Harding, and then as soon as we did that, Dominic Raab resigned, or not resigned, but he said he was no longer standing, so we'll record another one of those. But we do appreciate you watching and listening to our usually coherent ramblings. But from all of us at the Lib Dem Podcast, thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.